All right, welcome everyone to Introduction to Ancestry. My name is Ellen Anderson. I'm a local and family history librarian here at the St. Joe County Public Library. For those of you joining us in person and online, as I've said, you are more than welcome to kind of search along with me as I go through some examples about using Ancestry. If you just want to absorb, you are welcome to come back and use Ancestry here at the library anytime. It's available on any library internet connection. If you are an Indiana Library staff member joining us in person or virtually, this program is worth one library education unit. Our objectives for today's session are to explore the differences between Ancestry.com and Ancestry Library Edition. We're going to learn about using the search option to search for people and how to refine and narrow our search to get at the records that we want. We're going to learn what to do with records once you find them, and then we'll get into some tips and tricks about searching for specific record collections and other things about using Ancestry that you might not have known about. So what is Ancestry.com? If you're not familiar with it, Ancestry.com is considered one of the big three genealogy research databases. They primarily hold indexed records, but they also have tree building tools that allow you to save and organize your finds. They have genealogical records that are worldwide, but Ancestry in particular has a US and Canadian focus. Other sites like MyHeritage and Find My Past have a more European or worldwide focus, where Ancestry is strong in US and Canadian records. The library edition of Ancestry provides record access to patrons, but takes away some of those account features that you get with a subscription. All right, we're going to go into the details between Ancestry.com as a personal account and Ancestry.com as a library account. But before I do that, I'm going to go close the door. All right, so as a personal account, if you sign up for Ancestry with an email address and a password, you are able to use that personal account, even if you don't pay for anything on Ancestry, to create a family tree and to edit that tree. Whatever records level you have access to, it allows you to search those records and save them to people on your tree so that you can see what records you've attached to those individuals. It also allows you to download and print any of the records that you can see. If you purchase a DNA test through Ancestry, you can manage it using that account as well. It allows you to view public trees that other members of Ancestry have created. And if you have any level of paid subscription, you are able to message those account creators and communicate with them about your tree. This is a great way to make contact with cousins who are doing genealogy research on the same families as you. The records subscriptions or the records available to you are based on the subscription level that you pay for. There's a free level with a few records access, things like censuses or other collections that are listed as free. The base level subscription is US only records, which gets you a long way for most people's genealogy research. I myself subscribe at a US level, and anything I want to do beyond that, I come to the library for. You can also subscribe for world level records access, and there's even a premium all access tier, which gives you that world level records access and then gives you basic access to a few of Ancestry's sister sites. They also own Fold3 and newspapers.com. So you can get basic access to those sites with the all access. So that's what you can do with a personal account. With a library account, fortunately, they've done a nice thing for us and made it a separate URL. Ancestrylibrary.com will get you to the library site. It's also available through our database list, which I'm going to show you how to get to in a little bit. You're able to use the library's access to search records, download and print those records. You're able to view public trees, but you can't see who the creator is. They take the name of the creator off. You also don't have any messaging capabilities because you're not on your own personal account, so how would you send and receive those messages? Keep in mind that Ancestry members can also create private trees, which won't appear in any of these public tree searches. Through the library edition of the site, you are able to access worldwide level records, except for some very, very tiny things. And these sound like big categories. I know newspaper sounds like a big category, but really Ancestry's content in those areas is very, very small. So they plucked out those few categories and they moved them to other products that the library subscribes to, like Fold 3, newspapers.com library edition, and Heritage Quest, which is a great one also that I'm not going to get into too much today. But Heritage Quest is almost like a light version of Ancestry.com, has the same navigation, the same interfaces that you're used to, but it's available from home with your library card. So you can get to things like the census, which you can get to through a lot of places for free, but you can get to them with the Ancestry feel from home. So you're able to access all the worldwide records. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll come into the library, they'll sign up for an account with their email address, and then they'll kind of leverage the library's access by coming into the library. They'll get on any public Wi-Fi connection. That could be through a library computer, through your own laptop on the Wi-Fi, through your iPad on the Wi-Fi, any branch, any location. They'll sign into the library edition to look at records. They'll sign into their personal edition to edit their tree, and they'll just kind of toggle back and forth, maybe in 2 different windows, 2 different browser tabs. So you can kind of do that to have an account and make a tree without having to pay for the records. And that's what people do a lot. Or like I do, I pay for the US records so I can sit at home in my PJs and do my research. But then if I really need to look up something in Canada, I'll just come into the library and do it, because that doesn't happen very often in my research. So that's the difference between those accounts. Before we move on, is there any question about this difference? I want to make sure we're clear, because this is a great thing to make use of, but I know it's confusing.
I'm sure you said, but we have to be at the library to access libraries.
Correct. To use the library edition, they did have a short period of time during COVID when things were closed that they had access from home. That has ended now. Sadly, it was very nice of them to do that. But sadly, that's ended. So now you can access it from anywhere. So that includes, sometimes people think they have to come all the way into main library to local and family history to get to Ancestry. Not true. You can get to it from your favorite neighborhood branch or from your laptop in the parking lot if you really want to. I don't know. However you want to do it, you can do it. All right. So moving on. To get to Ancestry Library Edition, you'll need to either visit ancestrylibrary.com. That's a great, easy URL to use. Another option is to get to it through our library database list. And I'm going to show you the steps for getting there. It's really easy. You just visit the library homepage, sjcpl.org. And under Research and Learning on the far right of the screen is a list of research and learning options. And the first one is databases and journals. There are also a couple other local history related things here on this list, which I encourage you to explore. But for today, databases and journals gets us to a big long list of databases that the library subscribes to. And again, I encourage you to explore all of these if you aren't familiar with them. But today we're going to look at the local and family history category, which will jump you down the page to our section. There's a lot of databases in this list, but the one that we're interested in is the second one here, Ancestry Library Edition. And that will take you to the homepage on Ancestry.
Check question. Is heritage expensive?
MyHeritage? I'm not familiar with the pricing structure for MyHeritage. I encourage you, before you pay for any database, genealogy research database, I encourage you to look at their title list. They should offer you a title list or the ability to search, even if you can't click on results. So you can see and get a sense of, does this database offer things that are going to be useful to you before you give them any credit card information. I recommend that you study the database before you just start paying for them. Sometimes they'll even have a free trial. All right, we're going to go back to our slides. We'll come back to Ancestry in a little bit, but now we're going to talk about using the people search. I'm going to use a lot of screenshots in the program today because every single time I try to rely on a live site search, there's some problem. So we're going to use a lot of screenshots today, but a few times later on in the program, we'll click into a live demo of the site. Of course, it makes it hard. They like to update the branding every time I change my screenshots. So, all right, so searching for people. This is the main way that people make use of Ancestry. They come into Ancestry and they want to find a person. You've got a person in mind that you're looking for. Maybe it's, an ancestor that you're trying to find. So this is where you can decide if you want to search along with me. If you have access to Ancestry, wherever you are, whether you're virtual or in person, you are able to search along with me if you wish. I'm going to give you just a little minute here to write down some information if you want to kind of do a search along. This is optional. If you just want to listen and watch, that's fine too. But I recommend that if you're going to search with me, that you write down a name, an approximate birth and death date, and at least one place that's relevant to this person. So if you're going to do that, take a minute to find your information for the person you're going to search for. And then every time I'm doing a search, you can put the information for this person in the site along with me. Is it case sensitive? No, not really. You can put in however you want to spell and it won't matter. In fact, you'll notice that in my screenshots, I go from lowercase to title case a couple times.
How did you get to search along with me? That was there.
If you want to go to ancestrylibrary.com on your laptop, you can follow along while I am doing example searches up here on your own computer.
Well, I got to the Ancestry page. Library.
Okay.
I don't know how to get there.
Okay. So once you've gotten to the library homepage, okay, so you're actually gonna go
You just gotta find the
here. Okay, so just leave it there and then you can
Good.
search when you're ready, when we're ready. All right.
There's like 5.
Mine's not very good.
Okay, now you're on the homepage. Yeah.
Database, okay.
All right. Okay, let's move on. So from that homepage on Ancestry, there are a few different ways to get around. There are 2 ways to get to the main person search box. One option is to click on the search button in the navigation bar at the top, and it will drop down a list of options. And there will be one option that says all collections, and that will take you to the search box. Another option is to use this begin searching button here. That will take you to the same place. I will point out this green box on the side. This is a new addition, and I admit I'm not too familiar with it, but what it seems to be doing is searching public member trees and delivering them in a very interesting way. And it doesn't seem to rely on the same search algorithm as the rest of Ancestry's site, because I wasn't able to get the same results to come up. So I would just steer clear of that unless you just want to kind of poke around and explore, be my guest then. But I can't really predict what you're going to be able to get out of that. So I would leave this box alone. So you can either go to begin searching or search and then all collections. Either of those will take you to this search box. The search box here is very simple. It gives you an option to enter any sort of given names, a last name separately, a place that's relevant, and a birth year. It even gives you a handy little birth year calculator if you happen to know, for example, you have an obituary in front of you for a grandparent or a great-grandparent, and it gives an age and a year, and you don't want to do the math, it'll do the math for you. I recommend that you start with kind of a less is more approach. Start with a first name, leave the middle names out if you have them, put in a last name. Even though it gives you a suggestion of city, county, state, and country, I recommend you just start with a state and see where that gets you. You can always refine later. And that birth year is very important. Even if it's an estimate, a birth year is helpful because it will help Ancestry eliminate completely irrelevant options. If you've got an ancestor born in 1810, a 1790 census doesn't do you much good. If you've got an ancestor born in 1810, then a 1950 census doesn't do you much good. So it'll help kind of clear out some of those extraneous results by putting in even an estimated birth year. I have to give Ancestry credit. Their search algorithm is pretty good. I find that even if I put in a completely wrong year, as long as it's in a ballpark of the right time frame, Ancestry will pick out results that sound actually like the right person. It's got a pretty good search algorithm. All right, so if you do want to kind of practice searching, this is the time to put your information in that you have kind of extracted.
I assume that besides doing their own research, people enter information. I put my grandfather in, I've got two different birthdates here. Now, is that because somebody just?
It depends on what the source is for those. If it's different records, they may not be records for the same person. And it may just be an error in some record or some tree.
I know Ancestry goes out and digitizes a lot of things and stuff to the database, but do they also let people go in and add information is what I'm saying.
Oh,
Is it picking this up?
yeah, I mean, not looking at the results, it's hard for me to say, but it could be that, yeah. All right. So when I approach a search, I like to think of it as asking a question. It's my opportunity to ask Ancestry's database a question. It's really tempting to just go in and just put in some information and see what comes up. And sometimes that's fine. But really the way you're going to get the most out of a database as vast as Ancestry is to go in looking for specific information, because that will help you know what details to add that you already know. It will help you know what refining techniques to use to get at the data that you want. So for example, I might pose a question like, where was John Smith born? Or when did Mary Johnson die? Did John Miller serve in the Civil War? Where was the Wilson family living in 1880? Choosing a question to ask will help you get the most out of your search. And so for example, in this case, I'm putting in information about William Farr. I know he lived in Indiana, and I know he was born about 1865. And the question that I want Ancestry to answer for me is, when and where did he die? Specifically, I want a death certificate if I can get one. That's what I'm after. So we'll see if we can get Ancestry to give me what I want. All right. So here is my search results page. Once I hit enter on that search or hit submit, this is what I get back. And let's break down the anatomy of this page.
Where'd you get that question, writing the sentence or writing a question site at?
I'm sorry, I'm just going through slides. So this is not like a part of the website.
Oh, where do we type in that question?
So Ancestry just has a search form like this. They don't accept natural language questions, but me having that question in my mind will help me better approach my search. Okay, so we're just still filling in a search box with what we know. And then that question will drive how I adjust my results later on. So here is my search results page. On my search results page, it gives me in the upper left corner a summary of the terms that I entered. It gives me a list of filters I can choose from, and it gives me a list of record results. It gives me the title of the collection, which is blue, which means it's clickable, and it gives me a summary of some of the data points that Ancestry has indexed out of these historical records that have helped bring them to this list. So what can we do with this? Because I notice here, I don't see exactly what I'm looking for. I told you I wanted a death certificate. I don't see a death certificate on this list. How can I refine my search to get at that information? Well, I can take a look at what kind of records are coming up. Like we said, we've got a bunch of censuses here and even a marriage record. How many results are coming up? This number tells me 117,000. That's a lot of records. It's okay. There was no way I was ever going to look through all of those, but maybe we can cut that number down and hope that we get at the relevant ones. And I can even hover over a collection title to preview what will come up in that record, which is handy. I don't have to click into it to find out. I can save myself a click by just hovering and giving a preview. So there are some things here that may be interesting, but this is too many results and none of them are what I'm looking for. So how can I adjust my search to get something more useful to me? Well, one of the things I can do is to go back up to the summary of my search terms and refine my search by adding more facts. I know a little bit more about William Farr. I wanted to use that less is more approach just to see what I would get. And I see what I get. And now I want to add a little bit more. So in that upper left corner, there's a little pencil icon next to the little 3 dots. Here's a zoomed in version. Clicking on the pencil will bring up a way to edit my search, and clicking on the 3 dots will let me start all over. I don't want to do that, but I do want to edit my search, and it will bring up this search box once again, the one we've already seen. Now I want to add more details, but I want to add details that don't fit into these 4 fields. I want to add even more details. I can do that by clicking on Show More Options next to the search button. Show More Options will bring me a new window, a new overlay that has even more fields. A lot of fields. In fact, more fields than I should ever be entering into one search. If I filled out all of these fields, Ancestry would tell me I got 0 results because it's information overload for its database. So we're just going to add 1 or 2 facts at a time. I might, for example, choose to add, depending on what I'm looking for, I may add a spouse's name. I may add parents' names. There are fields for that here with family members. You could click on those and it would bring you up a way to enter those. I could do that. I can add death information under event. There are a list of events along the top here, and I could click on death and add a death date. I could add a birthplace. You'll notice next to birth year, there is a location field that's blank right now. And I could go back up to this first and middle name field, and I could add something there. So in my case, I've chosen to add a middle initial because I noticed that in the results I got before, I got a lot of different middle names. So I think I could eliminate some of those results by just putting in 1 middle initial. And I have adjusted the location to go from state to county. We tried the less is more approach by just putting in a state, and now we're going to refine it by adding the county and see if that brings us more relevant results. All right, so I'm going to hit search, and let's see how our results have changed. We had 117,000 before that were mostly censuses on the first page. Let's see what we get now. So we're still getting a lot of censuses, but we have definitely eliminated a few of those middle names that were not the right person. And I see some more relevant things here. In fact, this is probably my William Farr. It's an 1880 census. Is that interesting to me? Probably. Is that what I'm looking for in this search? Not exactly. So we're gonna keep going even further. And now that we have refined our search, we're gonna actually do another step of narrowing our search. But before we get there, you may have noticed when you click on that expanded search box that it brings you up these little check boxes under your fields that say exact. They are very, very tempting little check boxes to click on, but I suggest that you avoid them. Being too restrictive with your searches will have you miss out on useful results and relevant results. If you click on any of those, it will bring up a little drop-down menu that gives you even more options for how exact you want to be. But the problem is that those exact buttons are just that. They search only exact terms. For example, if I made William E an exact term, I would never get any results where he went by William with no middle name, or went by William Edward with his full middle name. I would never get a result where he went by Bill or Will. So I don't find those exact buttons to be very useful. In fact, I never use them when I search. Now, if you are just trying everything that you can think of because you've got this mysterious ancestor that will never ever come up in a search and you're just going to throw every option at the wall and see what sticks, then please feel free to play around with those. But in my daily searching, I just ignore those buttons completely. I leave them alone. They are not very useful to anything I've ever researched. Also, spelling variations happen and Ancestry is pretty good at overcoming them. All right, now I've done my search for William E. Farr in St. Joseph County, but I'm still not getting what I want exactly. I want to see if Ancestry can deliver a death certificate to me, or at least death information. So let's see if we can do a little bit more work here. We haven't yet touched on these filters on the left-hand side. they give you a list of categories, locations, time periods that you can use to help narrow the amount of records that Ancestry searches. So, for example, if I know I'm looking for death information, I can try clicking on the birth, marriage, and death category and see if that brings me something useful. Even further, because there's a little caret next to it, that means there's even more options. And once I click it, there's an option for birth, marriage, and death separately. So if I click all the way into death, burial, cemeteries, and obituaries, that will restrict my search results quite a bit. Now we're down to maybe 10,000 records. So here's what I get. It says 16,000, but 16,000 is a far cry from 117,000 that we were a few minutes ago. So maybe there's something more useful here. Now I see Indiana death certificates, not quite the right person. I see find a grave information. If you're not familiar with Find a Grave, it's a crowdsourced site for burial information. It's not, of course, 100% accurate because it's crowdsourced and based on headstones, which were usually created, long after a person's death, but they can be useful jumping off points. And actually, I'll give you a hint. My screen is not big enough to get it, but if I scroll down 2 more results below this, my death certificate I'm looking for is here. So I see a death certificate in my search results list and I click on it. And here's what I get. This is what my results page looks like. So let's get into using and saving a record. We'll break down this whole page and everything you can get out of it. So first, it gives me a summary in the center of the indexed data that Ancestry extracted from this death certificate that's in their collection. Ancestry has real humans, for the most part. We'll get to a point where they don't, but they have real people look at historical records and transcribe information out of those records. So that's how it ended up here as a searchable field. At the top of the page, we see the name of the person in this record, and we see the name of the collection where this record was found. You can't tell from my slide here, but that collection title is actually clickable. So if you were doing a lot of research in Utah death certificates, for example, and you only wanted to look at those, or you think there might be more records in there that are useful to you, you could click on that and you could go straight into that collection. So it's a nice navigation tool to help you kind of get around the database that the collection title here is clickable. Then we've got a thumbnail here for the original record. Don't skip out on that. You got all the way here. Don't miss the original record. It's there and you can click on it to see the whole thing, not just the index data. Underneath all that information is information about the source of this record. Where did it come from? A citation, they give you a pre-made citation right there. So if you did need a citation for some reason, you can just copy it right out of there. And there's even a little learn more here that would expand a description of this record. The description is very handy because someone has taken the time to explain in plain English what this source is, where it came from, and that can give you a little bit of information that will help you decide, is this source reliable? Is this source relevant? Where did this come from? Sometimes you get things like death certificates, which are, pretty reliable records, but sometimes you get things like a database that Mrs. Smith made of all the obituaries in her county. And you're like, I don't know where this came from. Who's that? Where did they get this? So it's useful to read those, especially if you come across a collection where the title isn't obvious. If you can't tell from the title what it is and where it came from, that's really useful information to read. All right, and then this sidebar here on the right has suggested records. This is a little bit deceptive. So what this really means on this sidebar is members who have public trees on Ancestry, or even not public trees sometimes, members who have made trees on Ancestry linked this record that you're looking at to the same profile in their tree as they linked these other records on the side. And that could be one person, or that could be 100 people, or that could be 1,000 people. So the usefulness of that varies depending on how good of a researcher those people are. If they looked at 2 people named John Smith and they're not the same person, but they put them on the same tree, you're out of luck. So those can be good jumping off points. They can be good leads and hints, but I would be cautious in accepting suggested records as factually the same person. Use them as inspiration, use them as leads. They can be handy, they can save you time. If you see the same person in 10 different years of the census and you can just click through them right there, it can be time saving. Just be careful to judge for yourself whether it's really the same person or not. All right. When I get to a page like this, I'm done my research, I found the thing that I think I'm looking for, and I get to this page, here are the steps that I take to use this record. So the first thing I do is I read through that indexed data right there front and center to make sure this sounds like the person I'm looking for. I compare it to what else is in my tree, the other records I have, and I say, yep, this identity seems to match. The next thing I do is I will click into that original document, which we'll do in a second. I'll show you that. I read everything in the original document. I will next download and print a copy of that document for my records. I never rely, even if you pay for Ancestry and keep your tree there and do all your research on Ancestry, I never rely on Ancestry to store my research for me as my sole record storage space, because privacy laws change, subscription changes. You may decide tomorrow that you can't afford your subscription anymore, or that you don't want to do this anymore, or you don't, you forget to pay for it. Laws change, privacy laws change, contracts change. Ancestry has a contract with all of these agencies for these records, and they may decide to pull those anytime. So I never rely on Ancestry to be my storage space. I always download it to my own computer or print it out from my own files. Then I will read through that source information because I want to make sure that I'm really accepting good quality records into my research, that it's really something I can trust is reliable. And then I will only at that point incorporate the new found information into my family tree. And the last thing I'll do is something that I think people miss is they found the record and they're done. But that's not the end of it. This record has all kinds of information. It has checkboxes and tick marks and little fields with symbols in them that you weren't expecting to find. It has the name and the death date, great, but there's more leads there. So look through your record and see what leads it can generate for you. What new questions does it spark that can send you off on another avenue of research? That's where the real value in doing your genealogy research is to see every document as a potential lead to the next question. All right, the last thing, which I couldn't really show you on this page because it lands below the suggested records box. But if you scroll down, there's going to be a box that says send your find home. What does that mean? It's an underutilized feature that Ancestry offers. They have this send document button. And what that means is it will bring up a prompt for you to enter your email address. This is with the library edition specifically. Because you can't save it to your tree right from there, they want to give you at least a little bit of help in getting that record back to your home computer. You do have the option of downloading it to your flash drive and stuff, but this is another option. You can put in your email address and it will send you an email. And in that email will be a link that's unique to you. And it will give you access to the record image only, not to this page, but to the actual image. It will open a prompt to download it to your computer. But this is what the email looks like. It says, you've made a discovery at the library. Great, you have. And it will give you a list that says view your discoveries. That link will take you to a list that looks like this. That's called My Discoveries. And everything you've ever sent using that feature will appear on this list, unless the contract has changed. For example, here on the second one, that button is missing. Download image is gone. That's because that record doesn't exist anymore. And notice that here, I've sent that death certificate home and it tells me I did this on February 13th. Below here, that last record, that's from July 2016. That's a long time ago, but Ancestry will hold on to that for you. So you can download the image. It will bring up a download prompt. Where do you want to save it on your computer? And it's a good way if you don't want to ferry a flash drive back and forth to the library to take the records home. Although I like the flash drive method myself. I feel more comfortable with it. This feels a little scary to me. Just shooting it out into my email and then going home. I'm not very comfortable with that, but there's also a few promotional discounts here. I will give you, if you did want to pay for Ancestry or one of these other sites, these aren't the best deals you're going to find. Go look for other deals. All right, so back to that record page. So we haven't even clicked into the original record yet. Let's do that next. So here, when I click on that thumbnail, it brings me to a record image. It starts by giving me a zoomed out view, but there are tools here. You can use the scroll on your mouse and you can zoom in as far as you want. It gives me the title of the collection and the name of the person. It gives me some information about how this collection is organized. It's very, very tiny font up here, but up at that top, it gives me a little bit of a sense of where this record falls in the bigger collection of death certificates from Utah. It gives me, even down here, a page number in the collection. This is page 748 out of 1619 in this group of Salt Lake County death certificates from 1926. So if you were looking at something where you thought you'd see people on multiple pages, you could click back and forth in those pages right from this view. These little back and forth arrows would take you to the next page. In this case, it's a death certificate, so we're not really interested in the next person that died or the previous person that died. Along the side, there's a little arrow with a line in this little toolbar on the right, and that will pop out a little details window. So you don't have to go back to the previous page to see the index data, to see the related records, those suggested records, and the source information. It's all available here from this page. There's a little wrench icon that allows you to print and download. So you can open that little tools bar and then print or download. There's some other tools here in case there was something wonky with your record. You could invert the colors, or you could flip it or rotate it. I don't really make use of that, but because Ancestry's records usually look just fine, but if you did need to, there's some options there to adjust. And then once you go into print, it'll give you the option to print the entire page, or if you had some zoomed in view that you were interested in, wherever you left the zoom level, it would give you that option too. You can add a page with the index and source data, and it gives you a suggestion of make sure that your printer is in either portrait or landscape, depending on the orientation of the record. All right, same deal with download. You can use that toolbar and download, and then you can take it home on a flash drive from the library, or if you're using your personal account from home that you've paid for, you can download right to your home computer or download your laptop that you brought to the library, whatever you want to do. All right, so that's the basic people searching on Ancestry. Let's dig deeper into what Ancestry has to offer by searching specific collections on Ancestry. This is where I think the real magic happens on Ancestry, because Ancestry has billions of records in their collection. And when you go to that people search field that we started at and you put in a name, you think that you're searching billions of records, but you're actually not searching Ancestry's entire collection. Ancestry has so many records in their collection that if you hit that enter on your search bar, the very first search that you entered, and Ancestry searched every single record in its collection, you might sit there for 5 minutes before your screen loaded. That's how many records Ancestry has in their collection. So they know what the most likely records are that you're going to need to use. And they give you the top, I don't even know what percent, but they give you the top portion of records, the censuses, the death certificates, the city directories, all those things. But there are some collections floating around in Ancestry that they can't deliver to you in every single search because it would just be too much. So this is how we can get at some of those. Searching specific collections. There are two ways to get to what Ancestry calls the card catalog. One is that same drop-down menu, and the other is new collections. Search and then drop down to card catalog. Either of those will take you to what Ancestry calls their card catalog. And card catalog's a funny archaic term because we don't have card catalogs at the library anymore. So there will probably come a time in the next few years where Ancestry feels like they have to change what they call that because no one's going to know what that means. But you can come to Local and Family History and use our card catalog and pat yourself on the back that you know what the card catalog is. All right, so that drop-down menu, search, and then card catalog. What this will do is take you to a list, not searching within the collections, but a list of what collections Ancestry has in their database. And you can use that to look for collections to browse or search within a specific collection. Here's what the card catalog homepage looks like. So let's take a tour. So the card catalog has a search box up at the top that allows you to search within the titles of the collections or keywords of those collections. So if you know what you're looking for, you can go right there. It has the same kind of filters that we saw earlier that allow you to filter by the type of information or the location or even by date down here below the fold. It gives us a list of all the collections that they hold. They give us a title, a category, a number of records, which is a surprisingly useful thing to pay attention to. If you're looking for like Indiana death certificates and you see a collection that has 900 versus a collection that has 17 million, you start to get the sense of which one to click on. And then there's a new tag that sticks around for 60 days after a new collection is added. So you can see Ancestry is adding lots of records. At the time I took this, the entire page was new collections. I will point out there's an option to sort at the top. You can sort by the date added, by the number of records, or by title, which is helpful if you're looking for something specific. So, for example, here's a way that I use the card catalog. I put in Indiana in my search, and this brings up to me a list of 104 collections on Ancestry that have the word Indiana in the title. And there's a lot of useful ones there. For example, Indiana is a great place to search on Ancestry. Indiana offers birth certificates, marriage certificates, and death certificates on Ancestry. Not a lot of states can say that they have that many vital records on Ancestry. So you're very lucky if you're looking for Indiana ancestors. In fact, I will point out that as recently, my screenshot is not even updated. As recently as November, I think, they updated and added 6 years of death certificates to Ancestry's collection from 2011 to 2017. So very useful to look for records on Ancestry for Indiana. This is another way that I use the card catalog, is to pull up a list of all the censuses. I find this very handy because if you've ever tried to find your ancestor in every single census that they lived through, sometimes it's handy to just go through them one by one rather than trying to hope they come up on your search on Ancestry. So I will just go to the list and I'll say, okay, I know they were born in 1859. So they made the 1860 census, 70, 80, 90 doesn't exist, 1900, and I'll just go through the whole list. I'll go through one by one and search for them in each one. And that way I know I can check off in my head the list that I've looked for them in all the censuses. You can see even in this one, for example, I changed the sort by collection title so that they would appear in order. All right. If I clicked on, this is what I get. If I click on one of those collection titles, the secret behind that is that I'll get to a search box that's custom made for that collection. Ancestry, when they bring in a new collection and they index it, they make a list of what fields did we index out of this, and they'll custom design a search box just for those fields. So for the 1900 census, we have all of these fields that were indexed, and some of these fields don't appear in other types of records. So we've got things like a marital status and a relation to head of household. Those aren't common to all kinds of records, but they're unique to this census collection. And so they have a field for that you could search. So this gives me the option to do a search that's tailored to the collection I want to find within. And the other thing that you'll find by using the card catalog to get here is this browse collection option. This is really handy for some records that are easier to browse or are arranged in such a way that you want to browse them, or you think you have a missing ancestry and you know they're there and you're going to page through every page of the census until you find them. I know that because I've done that. And this is a way that you can do it. You can get into the collection a different way other than searching for people, and you can go through page by page. It's also kind of interesting to do this with censuses and things like that, just to kind of get a sense of the neighbors. Who were the neighbors? Who lived in this guy's area? You know, what was his community like? I can just kind of click through the censuses and take a look. All right, so we're going to see an example here of why I might want to use this approach. And one of those reasons is city directories. Ancestry has a big collection of city directories, but if you've ever tried to search them on Ancestry, it's very frustrating. And that's because city directories presented a big challenge to Ancestry. They are very, very dense with names. Thousands and thousands of names in a city directory. They're very densely packed text with lots of repetition, and you know, the lines are very close together. It's very hard to distinguish between those. Ancestry decided that it wasn't worth having those indexed manually because they're just too enormous. So they had them indexed by computer. A computer looks at the pages of those city directories and reads the names out of them and creates an index. But the problem with that is that the computer missed a lot of names. Also, there are things in city directories that aren't names, like businesses or street names or information about the town and its services, advertisements. Those kind of things aren't names, and that's what Ancestry is good at. Ancestry is good at names. So how can you get at some of that stuff in those city directories through Ancestry? Well, you can go in through the card catalog. So I'll do a search for city directories. I see this collection here titled U.S. City Directories 1822 to 1995, and it has 1.3 billion records in it. That's a lot. But if I click into that, oh, okay, that's what I was going to do, is click into that. If I click into that, I can get to that custom tailored search box, which is fine. I could use that if I wanted to, but I know for a fact that I have one ancestor who was probably missed in 50% of the city directories he appeared in. I don't know why. He also doesn't appear in a lot of other things. So maybe it's just him, maybe he's cursed, but I want to browse because I think that I can find him better through browsing. And let me tell you, once you start browsing city directories on Ancestry, you'll start to know way too much about what page number the letter S starts on, or you know, that kind of thing. So, but it's useful knowledge. All right, so I can use that browse option. I can put in the state. City directories are not organized by county, they're organized by metropolitan area. So I put in, whoops, I put in the city that I'm looking for, South Bend. I can look through this list of years. There's a lot of years here, as late as 1960 and as early as 1867. Let's say 1908. And it brings me a clickable title. And that will take me to the first page of the entire city directory, page 1 of 633. Now I've got a few different options here. I can page through using these back and forth arrows here. I could go to the next page, but that would take a lot of time. There's also a film strip here. The film strip is nice if you're looking within a few pages, but the film strip kind of runs out of battery after like 20 or 30 pages, and then it just assumes that you've reached the end of the book. So I don't like to use the film strip very much either, but if you're just looking within a few pages forward and back, it can be fine. But I actually really like to use this page number calculator here, or just entry here. I put in a number and just see where it lands me. And eventually you start to learn where you need to go in most of your directories. So page 525 takes me to the beginning of the South Bend section. So let's say I'm looking for my ancestor here, Michael Sorotic. Sure. He works at Oliver and he lives on Fisher Street. All right, so I found my ancestor that I wanted to find. Yeah. But let's say that I don't want to just find him in 1908. I want to find him every single year he lived in South Bend. I want to go one by one through every directory and track his address or his employer or something like that. Maybe his spouse will appear. So to do that, I can, from right here, I don't even have to go back out to my search page. I right here can use this navigation across the top. The collection is clickable and every layer of navigation is clickable. I can click on that year, it brings me that list again, and I can just go right on to the next one. And I still have to go to the next, I still have to go to the right page, which isn't going to be the same one as the last city directory, but, and in a minute, I've gone from looking at him in one directory to the middle of another directory. So really, really handy to make use of that navigation bar across the top to click around within your collections. All right, we're going back to the slides. Okay, so that's how you make use of the card catalog. I will say that these days, with what I'm doing with my research, most of my searches start at the card catalog, not at the people search, because I'm not looking for the easy to find stuff anymore. I'm looking for the really hard to find stuff. So I'm combing through unindexed collections and that kind of thing. So this is really where you get to, uncover the secrets of Ancestry. All right, a few other tips for searching collections. If you don't want to quite go as deep as the card catalog just yet, but you have, exhausted the use of the people search for some ancestor, you can try thematic collections, that middle of the drop-down menu that we haven't touched on yet, as well as some cards on the homepage will both take you to thematic collections. These have special search boxes that search kind of like the people, but they limit the number of collections from the get-go. So you don't have to eliminate all those other things. You can just click on a theme collection, and it will search within only those records. So that's useful, especially with the census. It's a great one to use for that. Or immigration records is another good one to use for that. Immigration on Ancestry, there are a lot of little bits and pieces collections. So coming together with that thematic search is really useful. All right, and one thing I know people really want to search, so I'm going to touch on it, are the public member trees. I know that's one thing people really like getting out of Ancestry, is seeing what other people have put on their tree. I always caution you to be thoughtful about accepting what other people have put on their tree as fact. Make your own judgments, review the records for yourself. But if you want to get to public member trees, you can go to the homepage and scroll down to the bottom. And on the bottom of that page, you will see quick links. This is the only way I could figure out how to get here these days. There used to be more links to it, but Ancestry's kind of tucked it away down here. Public member trees is one of the options under quick links at the bottom of the homepage. So if you do want to search public member trees, again, it'll take you to a tailored search box just for public trees, and you'll get results that look more like this. And you can click into a tree. So I put in William Farr again. I see he appears on 18 trees, and this is just one they've suggested to me. And I can see what someone else has put for William Farr on their tree. So this is true whether you're creating your own tree on your personal account or searching public trees. The profiles all look like this. You'll see a name, you'll see the source of the tree at the top corner, you'll see the vital details, and then you'll see a list of facts. You'll see in the middle a list of sources, and on the right, a list of family members. You can also choose to toggle over to the life story display to see this displayed as a timeline. Same stuff, different display. And you can toggle over to the gallery to see the images of the records that have been saved, plus any photos that have been uploaded to this tree. So for example, here, I really only see, well, we've got content and then we've got sources. So these are the sources that someone has saved. And then this is the content someone has uploaded manually, which mostly consists of articles like obituaries and things like that. William Farr, if you weren't familiar, he published a city directory in South Bend for a few years, but he moved to Salt Lake City. All right. So that is what you can see if you visit a public member tree, or if you are creating a tree, this is what you'll see when you're navigating around your tree. This is what an individual profile looks like. Okay, just a couple more little things to touch on. Finishing out that navigation bar across the top. One of the options there is Learning Center. It's a list of articles, printable PDFs that have tips or articles about doing research. So if you're looking for something specific, you can always check there. There's also an option for charts and forms that will take you to a list of blank printable charts. We keep some of these in local history that we can hand out to do research on. We keep the ancestral chart there, and family group sheets. Whoops, can't scroll on a PowerPoint. All right, we keep some of these in local history, but some people like to do kind of more of that paper-based work while they're researching, and this is a way that you can get free forms to print out to do that. So, in summary, I suggest that if you have a personal Ancestry account, you leverage Library Edition to get whatever you can't get from your personal account, whether that's international records or whether that's any records at all. Come to the library, make use of the library's subscription. Your tax dollars pay for it, so we want you to get the most out of it. Begin with that less is more approach to your search. Start with a few facts and add facts in as they help. In fact, combine different groups of facts. Try the middle initial and the parents' names. Try the county and the death year. Try, mix up your facts, try them out. Especially, the harder you're having a time searching, the more things you got to try to find it. Use those options to narrow and refine your searches to get at the specific information you're looking for. Always make sure you download and print a copy of those records so that once you found them, you don't have to find them again and lose them if anything changes on Ancestry's end. And then make use of that card catalog to get at specific types of records or to browse records that you're not able to search. All right, before I take questions, I know that was a long, wow, an hour exactly. All right, that was a long presentation, but before we take questions, I'm going to give you a few highlights of some of our upcoming events while you're thinking through your questions. If you're virtually joining us, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and Trey will pose them to the room. Some of our upcoming events on March 6th, we have our beginning genealogy workshop at the German branch. That will be at 5:30. That is a Monday. You can register online to attend that if you'd like to join us. That is a great companion to this program. This program was about the kind of mechanics of using Ancestry. Beginning genealogy is more of the overview of approaching genealogical research, no matter what tools you're using to do it. Then we've got our genealogy coffee chat. That is right here in the CLC down the hall in classroom A. And that is our casual discussion group. So whether you are experienced at researching or just getting started, whether you are having a lot of success or a lot of questions, that is a great way to come and just talk through with a group of like-minded individuals about your research. We also know that your family's eyes glaze over when you tell them about the cool census record you just found. So come talk to us about it because our eyes won't glaze over and we'll be happy for you. We have our One Book, One Michiana program coming up on April 19th. That'll be also in the CLC down the hall in Buter-Kernan Hall. And our finishing out the spring with Belief and Modernism with Jim Houghton, which is about the art at Our Lady of Hungary Parish. So if you have any interest in local history and local art, encourage you to join us for that. So with that, what questions can I answer for you about Ancestry? Mm-hmm.
Well, not for specific ancestry, but is it with women who have been married? You have two names to search. Is it best to start with a birth name or a married name or just?
That's a great question. Yeah, so the question is about searching with women's names. So women who have gotten married and changed their name, what do you put into that surname field? My recommendation is to start with the maiden name in the surname field. And then as part of that kind of adding facts, I will sometimes go into the spouse field and put in the man's surname in the spouse field. That tells Ancestry to look for either of those names in a record. If you still can't find anything, sometimes I'll go back and switch out the names, even though genealogical practice tells us to refer, document women by their maiden names. In reality, the records after they got married said whatever the woman went by. And so, you can try that too. In reality, try all combinations, but I usually start with the maiden name, add that spouse's surname, and see if that helps. Question.
In the chat, do the ancestors have to come through Ellis Island to be recorded, or if they came through, say, Canada?
So the question is about Ancestry's immigration records. So Ancestry has a lot of different kinds of immigration records. And there are some Ellis Island records on Ancestry, and there are some Canadian arrivals on Ancestry, although the laws governing both of those are different. And so they may or may not always be on Ancestry. I think that's also a good point that I want to make very clear is that Ancestry does not have every record. Ancestry only has the records that they have contractually agreed with an agency to put onto their database. So there are going to be plenty of states out there that have privacy laws that keep death certificates out of Ancestry, or where Ancestry, someone else has a contract to put them on a different website, or where Ancestry hasn't decided to make contact with an agency. So you can only see what Ancestry has in Ancestry on Ancestry. But sometimes you will need to go elsewhere to find other types of records. So for example, Ellis Island recommend going to the Ellis Island Foundation website for those. Another question.
Yes. What software do you recommend to use on a personal computer to save genealogy?
Ooh, that's a great question. I love talking about genealogy software. There are a lot of options out there. I will say now, when I say a lot of options, there are a lot of options out there. But there are a few big ones. The big one for people who like the look and feel of Ancestry is going to be Family Tree Maker. It used to be owned by Ancestry, but they have sold it off to another developer. So it's not quite as Ancestry tied as it used to be. It's also very expensive, and every time they change editions, you have to rebuy it. My favorite software is Roots Magic. They generally have a steep discount between new versions of the software, and they don't switch versions very often. They've just updated to Roots Magic 8. I say just, like 2 years ago. But Roots Magic has a very robust free version, so you can give it a try and see if you like it. And if you do, and you do decide to buy a key for it, you can just enter that right into your software and unlock the pro features without having to download anything new. So those are my two recommendations. There are also others out there. Legacy Family Tree is very popular. Reunion is a popular Mac-only software. So take a look. There's a lot of options out there.
How friendly are they in terms of, for example, if you're working in Legacy, can you copy into Roots Magic?
I would only recommend getting into a genealogy software that talks to GEDCOM files. GEDCOM is the standard file system for genealogical information. And almost every program I've ever encountered out there does. As long as you use a program that talks to GEDCOM files, you should be just fine moving between them. Now, GEDCOM is a file format that does not take all kinds of information. Some fields kind of get left behind because they are non-standard, and some things like photos and record images don't travel inside the file format. I know Roots Magic in particular, one of their selling points is that they are kind of a safe haven for people fleeing softwares that are stopped being developed. So they tend to adapt to whatever file formats other programs use, even proprietary formats. So Roots Magic is a good place to go if you've used something else and it stops getting developed and you want to move.
How good is Roots Magic at uploading a GEDCOM file to Ancestry, et cetera? Because I found Legacy leaves a lot to be desired.
The whole syncing thing is very difficult. Family Tree Maker used to be the place to go for syncing a tree between offline and online. But one of the reasons that Ancestry sold the software off to begin with is that the quality of internet started becoming better and better, and people didn't need to disconnect all the time. The dial-up kind of went by the wayside. So that used to be the reason that software even existed, was that you could work offline and then get online for a brief period of time and sync your changes, and you wouldn't have to be online all the time while you were working. But syncing is hard because the software doesn't know which version is the authoritative version. I am not familiar with syncing in Legacy, and I don't really do it in my Roots Magic tree. I just download backup copies on a regular basis from Ancestry. I don't go the other way. So it might be something to play around with.
You work on Ancestry and then you download to Roots Magic.
Yeah, and I just use it as a backup mainly, or a reporting tool mainly. Other questions? Yeah.
Since you know all the various trees and programs out there, is there one or any that focuses on having 4 grandparents, biological and adoption, and you can take off in those directions and make
I mean, I want to say that a lot of softwares should be able to handle atypical, other types of families, but I don't actually have firsthand experience trying out that in my software.
Family search. I was trying to work with them, and they want that bloodline,
Yeah, it's becoming more and more common for support for other types of relationships and other types of families. But I'm not sure where every software stands on that right now, or program even. Ancestry does have, if you're working within an ancestry tree, does have multiple relationship types you can edit within your tree. But it's displaying those is a little tricky. Any other questions?
How do I beat the 2 hours at the library before I get kicked off?
Well, I will say that if you come use the computers in local and family history, you won't run into any time limits. Generally, the time limits, you can always talk to the staff and see if they're willing to manually extend your time before it's up. But you have to go talk to them before the time expires. Right. Yeah, the time limit, on the public computers will kick on. But if you go up to the desk, they should be able to adjust that for you, especially if, like you say, it's not in high demand. Yeah. You want to do it before it kicks you off, but.
I have a couple questions. One is, how much of the Church of Latter-day Saints information is sent to Ancestry Library?
That's a great question. A lot of Ancestry works with the family search records, so you will find a lot of them there. And sometimes they'll just link you back to family search, or sometimes you can't even tell because they've shared so closely. There is a really close working relationship between the two though. So I do recommend though that if you've got hard to find ancestors and Ancestry isn't bringing them up, that you go to family search separately and search there, because the search algorithms and the indexing are very different on their records, even where they have overlapping records. So it does not hurt to try the same search in multiple sites, for sure.
And then my second question is, do you recommend a place to go to look for immigration records in Canada?
I am very unfamiliar with Canadian immigration records. I do know that there were long periods of time where there were not records being kept. I know Ancestry probably has what there is, but I'm just not familiar with what those collections are. Yeah, if you contact us otherwise, I can look into it a little more and see what I can suggest. All right. Yep.
You mentioned the exact, the clicking on the exact. Is that applying to actual spellings? Like one branch of my family would change spelling of the family name at one point. I'm not sure when. So, I mean, I would always check for it on those things. It isn't looking for approximations of that name, right? It's looking for what you put in.
If you click exact, it will only look for the spelling exactly as you entered it. If you don't click exact, Ancestry's algorithm is actually very good at looking at variations and bringing up what has the most overall overlap with your search terms. So I really think that, we hear about the algorithm all the time and the evils of the algorithm, but Ancestry's algorithm is actually really good. So I trust a lot to that when I do my searching. Okay, what I'm hitting on right now is a survey. Really appreciate your feedback on this program. Yes.